the big question is, why should we practice?
Why should we practice?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Specific into crisis management.
Specifically for crisis management. So I think we need to practice because we understand that the crisis plans and any plan that we've written needs context. So we need to put context or a scenario into the crisis plan. It's not telling us what to do necessarily. And if it is telling us exactly what to do, we still don't have context behind it. Crises don't happen that often. So we need to simulate the environment to a point where we can create context, we can fabricate experience and learning by practicing.
Yeah. It will probably never be exactly the same as a real crisis. No. But we can get pretty close by doing good exercises.
We can get absolutely as close as possible. That is if we understand what the crisis is that we're practicing for, or we can understand the context behind why we're practicing in the first place. So if it's increasing individual competence, then we can practice in that element. Or if it's testing our plans and checking for loopholes or areas where our plans fall down, we can absolutely practice in that context too. So we practice to increase competence, increase familiarity with the plan. We practice to challenge our plans and our processes. We practice challenge each other. And importantly, we increase trust in ourselves or trust in our team. So
hopefully.
Hopefully. And if we harness that idea, we can fail safely before it matters.
Yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind. It's not for real, right? So practice is a safe environment where we actually should be able to fail, right?
I absolutely believe in being able to fail during practice or during scenarios when it doesn't matter. So we want to fail often and fail early. But what we don't want to be doing is reinforcing the same failures, which is why we practice, because we learn from practicing as well. We learn from mistakes when it doesn't matter.
Correct. And you have an expression, you usually say that to me at least, is bring life to the plan, something like that.
Yeah, so just words on a page, but what we want to do is bring it to life. So what does it actually mean to me? Because everyone can read something, but if we all read a book, we can get emotions and stuff out of the book. But often crisis plans don't have emotions written into them. So how do we bring it to life? We want to have emotions, feelings, we want to have learning, we want to make it personal to us. And that's what we get through shared experience, and that's why we practice.
Okay, so we got our plan, and now it's time for implementation. That's an important step, right?
I think it's a really important step, and it's really difficult to do. Mostly because we overcomplicate things and we think it's going to be far more challenging than actually it needs to be. So the first thing we need to do is simplify. At Murphy, we rule crisis complexity with simplicity. So it's one of our overriding principles, is simplify things. So the first thing to do is understand the motivation of people. So why aren't people motivated? Normally, it's because they don't understand why we're doing something. But also, it could be that they probably don't have the knowledge and there's a fear of failure, or they're not motivated because they don't feel like they've mastered something. But that's why we're here. That's what we need to be doing now. So the first thing, first thing we need to think about is that it's not a box ticking exercise. The compliance age that we live in, a lot of people think it's purely box ticking, but there's so many more positives we can pull out of that. And the second thing is people think it takes a lot of time and it can be extremely expensive, but it shouldn't be, and it doesn't have to be. So we shouldn't be afraid of it.
But it does take time, right?
It takes time to implement if we do it correctly. And it will take a lot more time if we don't implement correctly. So a lot of wastage in trying to build something big and fast, because actually we'll have to rebuild it and start again. But if we take some time understanding motivations, take time to move away from the box ticking mentality and start to build in the bigger picture, wider awareness, actually the longevity of the project is well worth that time and investment, and will save money, and ultimately save the money that can be lost through crisis.
Could this be a good, let's say, window of opportunity now? We've had the corona, we've had the crisis in Ukraine, or the war in Ukraine, that actually affected us a lot. Is the motivation bigger now, would you say, when it comes to feeling prepared?
I absolutely think so. So one element of motivation is understanding why we're doing something in the first place. So now we can start to tap into a more powerful sense of motivation. This is people have seen crises and they've seen how the external environment can start to impact us. So one of the challenges for crisis or security managers is to create real life experience. Now we have a great opportunity that it's in front of us now, and we can start to see the impacts, whether it's cost of living, energy, or something far greater in terms of COVID, for example, that might have hit us. But it's relatable as well. So the challenge is to make something relatable and into our business. So absolutely, the opportunity's there. We've seen it. We can make things relatable. So in many senses now is the perfect time to start developing our crisis capability, because people get it.
And it will probably end up in new crisis in the future, right? We all know that for sure.
There will absolutely be a new crisis in the future, but what that crisis is, we don't know. So actually, if we consider our job as in crisis teams, or as a crisis manager, is we need to sell the plan. We need to sell why we're doing something. We need to tap into our inner salesman and actually finding this relatable content, breaking it down, increasing that motivation is helped by seeing the broader picture.
And you usually talk about that where you start just creating awareness about the risks, etc., and then you move on, and at the end you will reach like the end goal. You probably never do that, but that's a way to build it up.
I think so. So one thing I think is really important to say, plan ahead. So we plan ahead with time, we plan ahead with competence. So we can start to break it down into what do we want to do. So we're talking about implementing our crisis planning or our crisis plan. So we need to know one size doesn't fit all. So we also understand one size doesn't fit all in time. So I may be available at 9 to 10 on a Monday morning, but you probably aren't. And I'd suggest that Monday morning or Friday afternoons is not the time to be doing these things. So we need to find some kind of a way that we can break training down, or we can break the complexity down into bite-sized pieces that fits everybody.
Correct. And people that are engaged in the crisis management team, usually busy and so on, it's hard to get them in the same place. And when they do, they usually have other things to discuss as well.
Absolutely. It's really hard to get them in the same place. So what we need to move away from is trying to get everyone at the same time doing something. The remote world that we're working in now is actually a real positive for that, because we can tap into people globally all over the place. But as crisis leaders now, we need to tap into people when they're available and when they're motivated to do it. So we've got the why, we're trying to develop the timing and the how now. And also, we need to start to understand in bite-sized pieces, how do we build the competence of our instructors? Who do we have in place? Because I personally probably don't have time to run every training course myself.
No. You have enough usually to do.
Usually on those Monday mornings.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for a really good explanation of the importance and some really important steps when implementing this plan, or doing changes in the plan that needs to be implemented as well.
There's changes. I think I'll just finish off by saying we want to keep it top of mind. And we mentioned a crisis, the crisis around Europe now, the COVID crisis. We start to see different things coming into play. So it's already top of mind. But as security managers, we want to keep it top of mind even more. So how do we do that? We increase awareness. We start to give people little feeds, little bite-sized chunks of what's going on. By increasing awareness, we can actually start to increase people's knowledge base and their motivation in themselves, because I'll shy away from something that I don't feel knowledgeable in. If we start to drip feed people that information, we increase their knowledge base. We increase their decrease their anxiety, sorry.
They're good.
Decrease their anxiety over uncertainty. Because if we're practicing, decreasing that anxiety means, you know what, I'm going to face uncertainty a little bit better because we're keeping it simple.
Yeah. Talking about this is not increasing anxiety, right?
It's not increasing anxiety.
It's the opposite.
It's simplifying it and making it relatable and making it transferable. So we think about it in stepping stones, just like you were saying. We take stepping stones one piece at a time, we build it up at time in a bite-sized chunks that fit the audience.
And this is what we're actually heading for. We want everyone to feel certain that if something bad is happening, we will be ready to face it.
Absolutely. I think it's facing that unknown or that uncertainty with the confidence that I can trust the people around me and I can trust myself.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.